Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, I have a special guest who's going to help me continue the discussion we started last week on executive functioning. Today, we're going to focus on what we can do to help kids who struggle in this area. Let's jump in.
Millions of kids struggle with learning, processing, and social emotional difficulties. These challenges interfere with their ability to reach their full potential. Dr. Karen Wilson is here to help. Her extensive background in pediatric neuropsychology and higher education have prepared her for this unique mission. Listen as she delivers content to inform, educate, and empower parents and educators. This will enable you to identify challenges that kids face and get them on the road to achieving their full potential. This is Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus.
Today, my guest is Hannah Ross. She's a certified educational therapist based out of Santa Monica, California, and she has over 10 years of experience teaching in the classroom and one-on-one settings. I am so thrilled to have her on the show today. We are going to be discussing executive functioning, continuing our conversation from last week. Hannah, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to share with your listeners some tips and tricks about EF skills.
Wonderful. I'm so glad too. You know, I had this discussion last week about executive functioning, and it kind of came out of the Help Group Summit that was held virtually this year. And I had given a talk on executive functioning. And so last week we discussed kind of what it is, and you do all the work in helping kids to really compensate for their weaknesses in that area and help them develop skills. And that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast to talk a little bit more about that. So I'm really thrilled about this conversation. You graduated from Pepperdine University with a bachelor's degree in elementary education and your teaching credential, and you taught third and fourth grade as an independent school, at an independent school for a while, I think 5 years. And then you became an educational therapist. So tell me why you made that transition. I'd love to hear about that. And then we can jump into executive functioning. I love people's backstories.
Yeah, of course. Because honestly, when I became a classroom teacher, both my parents are classroom teachers in Beaverton, Oregon. So when I became a teacher, I figured I'd be a teacher my whole life. I, had always felt drawn to that profession. But as a classroom teacher, I did really love the community and excitement of being in a full classroom, but I started to notice so many students who I felt I couldn't really meet their needs in the full classroom environment. They were, for some reason, the way I was teaching to the rest of the students wasn't working exactly how they needed it. And I really found myself wanting to spend more time one-on-one with those students. And of course, as teachers out there know, that's hard or next to impossible in a full classroom setting. So that kind of led me to research other professions within education, and I magically found educational therapy, which I absolutely love. So after about 4 years as a classroom teacher, I decided to go back to University of California, Riverside, to get my certificate of educational therapy and start working in private practice as an ed therapist. And I absolutely love it. I love having those really deep one-on-one connections and being able to see like such a wide age range of students. And really get to know students as individuals without having to be tied to a set curriculum as a classroom teacher.
That makes such good sense. And I think that probably your background in education and teaching just gives you such great experience to prepare you for this educational therapy role, because you've been in the classroom, you've watched kids, you've seen those that struggle in a traditional classroom setting, and you are uniquely positioned to meet their needs in that role as educational therapist.
Yeah, I do feel like that because I really do have a good idea of what happens in the classroom. And honestly, a lot of times in my current work, I think back to myself as a first year teacher and I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. Now that I know everything I know about learning differences and diverse learners, I realize I could have taught in such a better way for all students, knowing what I know now. But really, it's helpful to understand what a classroom is like. And it's also really helpful to understand how hard teachers are working when I am trying to collaborate with them. And I absolutely love collaborating with my students' teachers. So it's really helpful just to know the immense amount of work they're putting into each student in their class as well.
And I love that you said that, because I think that collaboration is so important. Mm-hmm. And anytime I'm making recommendations for an educational therapist and for the school, I'm always saying that you have to have communication between the ed therapist and the teacher, communicate about where the child is, what the struggles are, how they're responding to the treatment and intervention. It's just so important in terms of helping the child move.
Yeah, certainly. I completely agree. And I think we both know those are the most successful cases, the one where we all work together on kind of a treatment plan to best fit that student's needs.
Yes. So today we're going to talk about executive functioning, one of my favorite topics to talk about.
Yeah. Me too.
And as you know, from the work that you do, because I refer a number of kids to you for executive functioning support, among other things. But we know that executive functioning is a huge umbrella term for a number of different things. And I, like you, am an educator. And so I love review. So I'd love for you to kind of describe or kind of review, like, what are executive functioning skills for people who may be just tuning into this episode, who may not have heard the term executive functioning skills, or who may have heard it but need a refresher. What exactly are we referring to when we talk about executive functioning?
Yeah, executive functioning skills are basically the skills that all people need to use on a daily basis to get things done effectively and efficiently. So they're not just skills that students and learners are using, but we're using every single day. I've heard them described as like the CEO of the brain sometimes. They're basically those skills that help people be successful in getting the things they need to do done. So it's an umbrella term, like you said, and within that umbrella are the skills of working memory, time management, organization, paying attention for longer periods of time, planning and prioritization, task initiation, flexible thinking, as well as being able to self-reflect on your own thinking and your own work, and finally, perseverance and regulating emotions. I think was that all of them? I'm not sure.
That is all of them. You're incredible.
Okay. No, I had some notes here.
You've seen this somewhere.
Yeah. So as you can see, all of these skills are skills that it's a wide range of skills. And they're all skills that we use every single day. If you even think of something you've done today, perhaps even cooking a meal, to do that, you have to use so many of those executive functioning skills without even knowing it. You probably had to plan the ingredients you need to get at the store, organize your supplies, manage your time to figure out if you had enough time to make that meal during your lunch break from Zoom calls. So these skills are things that we are all using every single day of our lives, and so are students and our children.
Absolutely. And it's not something that you need when you're younger, and then it goes away in terms of the demand. The demand actually increases as you get older. So I love that you describe it as a skill, as a set of skills really that we are using every day. So what does that look like for kids who are struggling with executive functioning? So when you see them, they come to you, how does this kind of show up in their lives?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say, when I think about EF struggles, I also would note that all of us have some of those executive functioning skills that we're really strong at, and we all have some that we're kind of weak at. If I think about myself, I'm really good at planning. I can plan a trip, no problem, love to do that. But when it comes to like working memory, remembering where I put my phone or my keys, that's a struggle for me. And if I look at these skills, there's some things that I'm inherently strong at and some areas where I'm inherently weak. And I see the exact same thing in my students. So the traditional student with executive functioning challenges probably looks like that student who has crumpled papers everywhere. They're not getting work turned in. Maybe they're doing the work, or maybe they don't even know they have an assignment because they don't realize they need to write it down. Even if they do it, the act of turning it in is a whole nother step. They likely don't really know how to manage time, or how to give themselves enough time to do the thing they need to do. It can also be the student who, when something becomes challenging, they want to give up, and they don't really have the skills to persevere and try a couple different ways to solve that problem. So this executive functioning challenges can certainly look a lot of different ways in students, especially in the world of virtual learning.
Yes. And I love how you described that you can be strong in one area and then weak in another. I have some of those working memory challenges with respect to like visual spatial. It's kind of like when you park your car in a parking lot and you have to remember where it was, right?
Oh, that's totally me as well. I'm so bad at that.
Right. And the thing is, the more things you have to remember and keep in your mind, the greater the likelihood that you're going to forget something that is sitting in your working memory, because there's just so much there to keep track of at a given time. And so that's something to keep in mind as well, is that some days that skill will be better than on other days when you don't have as high demand for a number of different tasks.
Certainly. And I think those executive functioning challenges and deficits students have don't reflect intelligence or a lack of intelligence in any way. They're just skills that, honestly, if we're looking at our learners, just haven't fully developed yet.
Mm-hmm. And that really speaks to the why, in terms of, why, because I know parents also have this question, why is my child struggling in this area? He seems really great. He's, reading all the time, but can't get all the items into the backpacks. Can you talk a little bit about why some kids might struggle more than others?
For sure. Well, to start off, like these skills, although they start developing, I think around the age of 3, of course, you can jump in and add more scientific detail, but they don't really finish developing until the age of 25. So students, high schoolers, college students don't have these skills fully developed, and it's not their fault. That's just how the brain works. I think on top of that, people develop at different rates, and part of it can be due to maturity. And we just, at the end of the day, have those. Some students need more explicit instruction to learn those EF skills, where other students can kind of pick up naturally how to organize their papers in a binder or turn something in, where other students, if they haven't really been taught that clearly, really won't know how to create a system. And I think that's an interesting part I kind of realized in my experience as a classroom teacher as well. A lot of times those executive functioning skills are not actually taught in the classroom. I even know when I was a classroom teacher, I didn't spend enough time working on those skills. So we're oftentimes expecting students to be able to write down their homework, get everything turned in, do it all correctly, remember that they needed to study for the test next Wednesday, when they don't really have a strategy and they've never really been taught a way to do that or to use their executive functioning skills successfully.
And that is absolutely true, because the students have to figure that out on their own. And like you said, for some kids, they can do that. But for other kids, it's a huge struggle without being explicitly taught how to manage all of that information, organize it, plan it, manage the time, hold things in their working memory, remember to pull it out at the appropriate time and use that information when it's necessary. So again, for some kids, it can be such a struggle. I'm thinking about right now, we're recording this in the midst of the pandemic, where a number of kids are at home, engaging in remote learning, distance learning. And a lot of parents are reporting significant struggles with students. Are you seeing that more now with distance learning?
Oh, yes, 100%. I first of all will say amazing job to all the parents out there who are working to manage their students' learning as well as their own jobs. You're phenomenal. I can't imagine how you do it. Really, that is, it's such a challenge. Virtual learning is so tough. And I think we don't really realize what we're asking students to do. In virtual learning, we're not just expecting students to learn the regular academic content they usually would learn, like their multiplication facts or learning how to write a 5-paragraph essay. On top of those things that we want them to learn, we're also expecting them to be able to use their working memory skills to manage all of these different online portals where they're accessing and turning in work. And think about your child's online world. There's many of these different places to go. On top of that, we're expecting students to be able to sustain attention and focus when they're learning from home and they're surrounded by distractions, whether it's their puppy barking, their younger sibling screaming, or just the fridge is there and they really want a snack. There's so many more distractions when we're learning in a virtual world. And so with all of the digital portals to remember the distractions, And on top of that, it really seems, I've noticed that it's harder for learning to seem as tangible for students when they're not just turning in a paper in person. It's much harder to understand the plan and be able to prioritize what they need to get done. Things are just out there on their online portals. And students don't necessarily understand the steps that they're used to in a classroom: complete the work, hand it to my teacher, get it back. The steps are all different now. And a lot of times students are even expected to remember some steps the teacher gave them and do those steps when they're without their class learning asynchronously. And for many learners, especially those with learning differences and attentional challenges, being able to, first of all, remember all those things that they were supposed to do, be organized enough to find the materials they need to do those things and to sustain attention to do them is so incredibly challenging. And those are all new challenges that students don't really experience to the same degree in a classroom environment.
Absolutely. 100% agree with what it is that you said, what you just said, because I think that asynchronous learning time is such a struggle for so many students because they don't have the cues that they would have in the classroom that's preparing them to make the transition from one activity to another, and the check-ins at the end of the day with the teacher reminding them, of the assignments that they need to do and their peer beside them that is doing the same work. They don't have that. And they have to manage and organize and plan for that asynchronous time on their own. And it just seems like we have very high expectations with regard to executive functioning for kids who are very young during this time of distance learning. And, before we got on the call, I was describing a situation with my 6-year-old where there's so many apps that he has to manage. And the instructions are, after we finish our Zoom call and after lunch, you're going to log into Seesaw, and then you're going to do your Epic for 20 minutes. And then you're going to read Raz Kids for 10 minutes. And then you're going to do Gigi. And then you're going to take a picture of your work and you're going to upload it to this portal. And it's a lot to hold. And you mentioned working memory, to hold in your working memory and then eat lunch and continue holding it in your working memory, and then sit down on your own, which can't be done for my 6-year-old. You need some cues to start that work, and then figure out what it is that you need to do. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, it certainly is. And that's why I do feel for all the kids out there doing virtual learning right now, because it's such a challenge. And I think it's more than ever, students are, exactly like you said, so much is expected of them. And so many students really want to do their best, but they just don't have the skills and strategies to get all their work in the way it should be. So I would say that's what I'd say is for everyone to have grace on themselves in this period right now and have grace on your child. It's a lot for students, especially young learners, to manage.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And, I think it's the younger they are, the harder it is to manage. And really, it really takes a team approach. The parents have to be in there with them, helping them manage and develop these skills, at an early age. But there are those students who struggle more than others. And kind of that's what we've been talking about since I started the podcast, and what we've been talking about with other professionals. And it's the reason why you do the work that you do. You're seeing kids who are struggling more with these things, with executive functioning, with reading, with writing, with math in some cases than others. And so when we think about executive functioning with difficulties with organization and planning and working memory, if parents are seeing their kids struggle in these areas, and then they work with someone like you, talk a little bit about what it is that you do to help kids who have those lagging skills.
Certainly. And I think the place I always start, particularly now, is with setting a routine and structure for their day and for their time. And this honestly would be done with a student as young as kindergarten and as old as a college age student, or even for adults. This can be helpful. So I think the important thing is always for students to create a routine, whether it's a routine of when they are going to log on to their classes, creating a schedule of when to expect each class to be that they can post near their computer and check throughout the day. another big thing is, since we're talking about the difference between the synchronous in-person Zoom learning versus the independent work time, I spend a lot of time working with students and families about managing that independent work time. So oftentimes, one of the very first things we'll do, especially now, is an end of the school day checklist with students. And this looks different for every student. We'll create a list of things they need to do every day when their virtual learning is finished, which could be checking their email, writing down those 5 things their teacher told them they need to do before the end of the day, writing it down right then, checking their Google Classroom, making sure they turn it in. All of those things. So it's a daily checklist students know to go to at the end of the day and check it off as they go. So that's like the first thing I can recommend for families to do on their own as well, just so students start to get used to that structure of their day, being in class and then having some work they can do. And I personally just love checklists and writing things down as soon as that homework assignment is assigned by the teacher, writing it down to take off that working memory load for the students and have it right in front of them. So after we figure out an end of the day routine, another thing we'll do is look at a full week schedule for a student, and kind of actually plot out where their time is going, usually like using different colors. We'll plot out like, okay, red is when you're in class. These are all the times throughout your day that are red times you're expected in class. Blue are your other activities and events you need to go to. Green are your times that you have free or can be used for homework. So we'll usually take like a big schedule and kind of color code it so they can visually see where their time is throughout the week. Because I'm noticing a lot of these students who are struggling with executive functioning skills in regards to virtual learning just don't really know how to manage their time outside of when they're on a Zoom with their teacher. So we'll talk about how they can give themselves healthy breaks where they're being active, and taking some time off the screen, as well as how they can help themselves transition by setting the times they're going to get back to work with their homework. And kind of even with a lot of students, we'll make a weekly plan as well as that daily checklist and really plan out. On Tuesday, I'm going to do my homework at this time. On Thursday, it's going to be these things. Having that daily schedule as well as a weekly schedule has been really helpful for students at this time, so they can, because even for me, every day kind of seems the same. They blend in and out to each other. But for students to really see what their week actually looks like, and every day is different. Okay, if you have something on Friday, here's how you can prepare for it by looking for those free blocks of time throughout your week. So I'm super big on routines, on planning, and getting that time management figured out. And then another big thing when it comes to executive functioning skills is figuring out how they can best sustain focus during class.
Yes.
Because that's something that honestly is hard for me. I've found myself in Zoom meetings, like large Zoom meetings, and kind of zoning off and losing focus. And so I've noticed my students are doing that as well. And that's a really huge EF skill, is being able to sustain focus, even for non-preferred tasks. So I talk a lot with students about how they focus best on an individual level. Maybe that's having a fidget near them that they can play with. Maybe that's making sure to ask their teachers questions in the chat to keep them engaged. For older students, it could be note taking. But figuring out some little tricks and strategies that can help them actually focus more in their virtual classes as well has been helpful. And then finally, a lot of the EF work I do comes when it comes down to actual academic subjects, because if we look at a lot of different subject areas, there's a lot of executive functioning skills required to be successful. Writing, particularly, to write a 5-paragraph essay or to do a book report, if you have a younger student, requires a lot of those skills we mentioned, that planning and prioritization, time management, organization, working memory. So we oftentimes will practice those skills within projects like a 5-paragraph essay or book report, something like that. And I'll spend a lot of time with students figuring out how to break their work up into smaller, more manageable chunks and spread it out over a longer period of time, so that they can feel successful. And honestly, really a big thing is just giving students the tools and strategies they need to be successful independently, and to really help them increase their confidence again in their learning by using just a few little tools.
Right. And really, I love that the fact that you're really focusing on helping them develop the skills, because then once they have the skills, they can apply them in a number of different areas. And I think the writing is such an important one, because there are so many students who have great ideas and, a lot that they want to say and have the vocabulary to use when they want to say what they want to say. But they get so overwhelmed with the organization and the planning that is needed to get that information out on paper that sometimes they write as little as possible, or they just put it all on paper and it's not well organized. It's not well sequenced. And so I love the fact that you show them really how to break up that large task of writing into smaller chunks.
For sure. And that's so helpful. For almost anything, that's like one of the blanket advice I'd give for any student and parent struggling with getting their child to do a task. Break it up into smaller, more manageable, bite-sized pieces.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I often think about kids who struggle with executive functioning, but you also mentioned kind of sustaining that attention and focus. And a lot of people are reporting that it's really hard to focus on Zoom. And that's true for adults as well as young people. And again, that sustained attention that's needed, breaking up that time also helps. So maybe taking those breaks. You talked about what is a way that you can stay engaged. And sometimes taking a break from that hour-long Zoom class is enough to kind of restart, the system in terms of re-engagement in the class again.
For sure. Even if it's just standing up and stretching or getting a drink of water, those kind of things. And I think for many students, it's just thinking about these skills and starting to open that discussion with how these skills are affecting their day-to-day life is a great first step too. Because I think that really self-reflection on what our own challenges are can be really helpful in addressing problems.
Absolutely. And then, like you said, then the student becomes more confident. They realize you get the help in developing those skills. Then you start utilizing those skills in your daily life and you see that it works. You see that you're more efficient at getting things done. Things are easier. The burden seems lessened and you're not as overwhelmed. And then you feel better. Students feel better about themselves because they're not handing in assignments late. They're not forgetting that they had a quiz the next day because they forgot to write it down. And they're more proud of the work that they do. So their writing assignment is better organized and, they feel that it reflects what it is that they wanted to say. And so at the end, you really have students who are more successful and feel good about the work that they're doing and feel good about themselves.
Exactly. That's always the hope. And especially for students with executive function challenges, they can oftentimes get labeled as lazy or unmotivated in class because they don't look like they have their work turned in. Their papers on the floor are crumpled up. So it doesn't really look like they care, when actually it's these skills that are keeping them from getting that work turned in or that paper from staying nice. So they really want to be successful much of the time, but don't know how. And, that's where this extra EF support comes in.
Right. And I've also seen where kids have done the work, but they haven't submitted it. It's not even like they didn't do it. It's sitting at home on the printer when they were going to school, or they forgot to save it. I mean, they made all these changes and, so there's a number, or they forgot which folder they put it in on their desktop. And it's just, there's so many things that can interfere with their ability to demonstrate what it is that they've done and what they know. It's
so true. And that's why it really does come back to the individual student. Different students will struggle with different things. So kind of finding what's that solution for that student's problem. Is it literally forcing them to make a check mark by the assignment when they've turned it in? Is it creating a better actual physical organization system for their papers on the desk? So different things can help different learners with those challenging things.
Yes. And I think the checklist is great. I love checklists. I love to-do lists, and I love little boxes that you can check off. And I think that for kids, being able to put a check, I think they get a surge of dopamine, honestly. I think that it's rewarding because it's like, yay, I got that done.
Yeah, I know I do.
Yes, absolutely. It's like a sense of accomplishment. They've done something. And it's a way of keeping track of what it is that they've done as well. So I love that, the use of a checklist. So you talked about kind of morning routines and end of day school routine, daily checklists, weekly calendar, weekly schedule. So if parents are at home and they're listening and they want to provide support for their child who might be struggling with some of these executive functioning skills, what are some things that they can do at home to help their kids?
Yeah, great question. I think the first thing kind of goes back to what we're talking about with creating those routines. And I think creating a family calendar and then individual calendars for each of your children is really helpful. So I just love having like a whiteboard calendar in the kitchen that lists the activities for students to expect for the week. And this also really models that skill of planning and organizing for students. So this can be just full family activities or individual student activities. Can just be posted somewhere where everyone can see on a regular basis. And even talking through, oh, I see that you have baseball practice on Tuesday. Let's put it there. I guess Tuesday night's not going to be a good time for you to do your homework. Kind of talking through that process is really helpful. Then I'd also recommend helping your child create their own weekly or daily calendar that can be in their learning space. And it could be something like I talked about, an end of the day checklist they go through, or even just like a weekly calendar so they know what to expect and what they can check off. That can be really helpful to feel like to give the students back some control. And so they can feel more independent. Some students will need more help than others with this. I think oftentimes like you can help your students set up the system, work with them to create the checklist or calendar, and check it for a few days. And then you might notice that your child is really starting to get the hang of it. So it might actually take you getting into Google Classroom and looking through it and showing them and making sure they know where to find their to-do assignments and their missing assignments. And kind of going through that routine with them for a couple days. But usually once that's happened, they will sort of hold on to that and begin to use that strategy a little bit more independently. So I think setting up a routine, an expected routine and schedule is number one. Another fun thing you can do is there's a lot of fun family activities you can do and plan that really can increase these executive functioning skills, especially now when a lot of us are spending time at home with our families. One of the things I love is just having your child cook a meal or plan to cook a meal. So this is also a project where you can practice breaking this big task, cooking a meal, or it could just be a dessert or snack, into a lot of little chunks. So you can first think, okay, what are the different things I need to do in order to be able to successfully create this snack or meal? And then how can I do them? So usually students will come up with, okay, I need to get the supplies, and then I need to make sure I printed out the recipe or found the recipe. I need to make sure it's a time that I can use the kitchen, and kind of have students practice those executive functioning skills in a fun task like that. Something kind of along those lines would be like planning a fun family day. If you have an older student, have them plan a fun Saturday for you. Make a whole schedule for your family and plan when you're going to do what you're going to eat, that kind of thing. Even things like that where students can take ownership and really be involved is a great way to get buy-in. And then they're practicing these skills without really even knowing they're practicing it. They think they're just doing something fun, but they're really practicing these skills that are super helpful for their daily life. And I always like, if you do something like this, circling back and saying, oh, you did such a great job making a schedule for our day. Isn't that interesting how that could be really helpful during your school day as well? So kind of using that conversation to tie it back to their academic learning as well. I also think for young students, oftentimes we don't really think about working on EF skills, or at least I, as an ed therapist, didn't think about it before for like students like kindergarten through third grade. But really, this is a great time to use games to start to develop some of these skills. And probably some of the games you have in your household already can be used for like a family fun, executive functioning, skill building game night. From Jenga is a great one for flexible thinking and perseverance. I love Clue is great for planning and problem solving. Let's see, what are some of my other favorites? Oh, the game Rush Hour is so great. That's the little one where the cars are the plastic cars get in a traffic jam, and students have to plan how to get their cars out of the traffic jam.
Interesting.
Yeah, those are just a few. I can share with you a list of some more of my favorite games for EF skills. But these games are fun and can kind of trick students into working in some of these important skills in a super engaging and accessible way.
That is great. I would love to get a list of those games and we can put in the show notes for families. I'd never heard of Rush Hour. So I'm familiar with Clue, but and our kids love Jenga. So I can definitely see how that would be fun, especially during this time where people are trying to find things to do and to engage and spend that time as a family. It's a great way to, again, build on those skills in a covert way, right?
For sure. Yeah, I'll share a whole list with you because it's interesting. Some of our favorite games really can practice those skills. They're games that practice working memory, organization, all that kind of good stuff.
Right. I think about that game, and I'm going to be aging myself. They used to call it concentration, where you put all the cards down and you have to kind of guess where they are and you have to pair them up.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still play that game I play that game all the time. I play it all the time.
But I love the fact that you're talking about, practical examples of executive functioning, and the modeling is so important for parents to model for their kids, because oftentimes kids will look at their parents get things done, but not make note of the steps that are needed to get that thing done. And so when you describe kind of talking out loud the steps, that's so important for helping kids to organize those steps in their head. So it's not just, oh, look, the mac and cheese is on the table for dinner. It's like, well, how did it get there? What are the steps that were needed to get that on the table at 6:00 at dinner time? So I love the fact that, again, you are breaking down that task into smaller steps and then modeling and saying aloud what needs to be done. So you're helping kids develop those sequencing skills, those organization and those planning skills.
Yeah. And I think it's even okay to model your own EF challenges and failures and say, oh, wow, I can see the house is really a mess right now. I guess I didn't have a plan for getting it organized. Let's see, what can I do next time to help myself? Maybe I'll make a day for doing the laundry. Every Tuesday is my laundry day. And just kind of talking through some things that you're thinking in your head to model that it's okay not to have everything perfect. Because I do see a lot of students feeling shame and anxiety when it turns out when their teacher emails their parent that they have 5 missing assignments, and they feel really embarrassed about it, when really it shouldn't be something that makes them feel that way. Instead, it should be more of a problem solving moment where they can see, okay, what can I do to change this and have a different outcome next time?
Absolutely. I love taking the shame out of it and just kind of normalizing the experience, because we all have these executive functioning, lags in some way at some time, right? And so normalizing that, this is something that happens. It happens more often for some than others, but it does happen. And let's problem solve some ways that we can address this so that we, get our next assignment in on time. So I think that's so important to kind of reframe what is happening and then use that as an opportunity to develop strategies.
Yeah, for sure. And I think this stuff can be done at home too, easily. Just identifying the problem, discussing it with the child, and then coming up with solutions. And really, if students are involved in creating the solutions, they tend to be more effective anyways.
Absolutely. This is great. And I think what you've done is you provided parents with their own set of skills that they can use to kind of help their kids further develop and strengthen their executive functioning skills. And I think sometimes when parents are overwhelmed and struggling to kind of manage their own executive function, it can be harder to kind of model that for their kids. But this is a great reminder of some things, some tangible things that they can do at home to support the development of those skills, or if the kids are struggling in those areas, to provide support for kids who are struggling in that area. So I appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. It is so helpful. And it's really beneficial to have these reminders that there are some, this is a struggle for a lot of kids, but there are things that we can do to help them. There are things that we can do to help them become better at managing organization and planning and the memory lapses that come with difficulties with working memory. And there are things that we can do. We just need to know, one, that they're having those struggles, and then getting them the appropriate support that they need. So thank you for the work that you do. It is so important. And I know that it's really changed the lives of a number of kids who are struggling significantly at school and at home, and have interacted with you and worked with you and have done spectacularly well afterwards. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for getting this information out into the world. I think it will benefit many people.
I do too. So if people want to follow up with you, what is the best way for them to contact you if they have questions, if they want to connect with you for a consultation or educational therapy or support for their student, their child?
Yeah, certainly. There's a number of ways you can reach out to me. My website is hannahross.me. So you can reach out to me through my website. My email is hannahross.edtherapy@gmail.com. You can reach out to me there as well. And then finally, my Instagram is at @hross_edtherapy. I oftentimes will post activities and games on there that you can look at as well.
Yes. And I love the activities you post on there. I follow you on there, and I'm often reposting them and sending parents to your Instagram. So great. And I will put all of your contact information in the show notes as well. Hannah, thank you so much for this time. And again, for sharing your expertise. I know it's going to help somebody.
Thank you.
Hannah gave us some really good tips. And she also reminded us that so many students want to do their best. And like she said, we need to show them some grace, particularly as they work to develop those executive functioning skills. If you like what you heard so far, please share this episode with someone else. And if you want to go a step further, leave us a review. Thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you, and I hope you'll tune in next week.
Thanks for listening to Diverse Thinking, Different Learning by Child Nexus. For more resources, visit us online at childnexus.com.